ورحمة الله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I would like to welcome especially our guests from Ghana. We're happy to have you, and we hope that your stay in the US will be good and beneficial to you and achieve all your purpose from this visit, inshallah. We are going in a series of lectures to explain the Quran, and we started several, maybe a year and a half or more, to explain from Surah Al-Fatiha, the beginning of the Quran, Surah number 2, number 3, and now we are in Surah number 4, which is Surah Women, Al-Nisa. We reached ayah number 19 last time, and today we are resuming from ayah number 20. If you would like to pick a copy of the Quran to follow with the book, that would be fine. There are copies here for you that you could pick. Ayah number 19 prohibited the pre-Islamic era practice of inheriting somebody's money and wife. People used to take the money and the wife together and by force. So the Quran prohibited that practice. When a person dies, his brother would come and without asking, without seeking approval of his brother's widow, he would cover her with a blanket or sheet or anything and say, "You're mine." She cannot say no, nobody can deny it. So if he has more than one brother, the first one coming to take her, she will be his. So women would be treated like furniture or anything that you inherit from a deceased person. The Quran, chapter 4, ayah number 19, prohibited that practice. Okay. Then ayah number 19, it goes on to say, and if you would like to substitute a wife in place of another, and you have given one of them a ton of anything, meaning like a dower, then do not take anything out of it back. So if you want to marry, if you're married and you want to divorce your wife and marry another wife, then don't take from your first wife the dower that you gave her and say, because I want to get married. You cannot do that. Nor can you take any part of it, because the dower is the right for the wife. Okay? Whether you lived with her one day or 10 years, her dower is hers. So you cannot take it back. Then it says, would you take it by the force of false claim and in sinfulness, in clear sinfulness? Then ayah number 21, it says, and how do you take it after both of you have had this type of intimate relationship and you have mixed with each other, and they, the women, have taken from you a serious, deep oath of commitment and a covenant? The Quran here is talking about how could someone, after paying the dower to his wife and marrying her and living together with her, how could he do anything or any trick to take back the dower he has paid her after all of this intimate relationship and all of the private life that they had together? But much more so, after the covenant, a woman normally takes from a man. And I want to stop at the word covenant here. What is the nature of the covenant that women take from men? Women take a covenant of commitment. The covenant is used in the Quran to reflect a deep oath of commitment. Even if you don't swear, but it is like if you had sworn, it's not light. So when a woman gets married, she doesn't have much information about her husband. So what is she going on with? She is going on presumed, superficial, thin layer of trust. Why? People tell her he is good. She says, okay, he's good. Her father or uncle or somebody says, I know this man. She accepts the recommendation and she engages the man and she marries. But only after the marriage that the woman discovers everything there is to discover about her husband, his manner, his level of manlyhood, his respect for his commitment, his ability and desire and willingness to take responsibility for the family affairs. So, but before marriage, she wouldn't know any of the above. So what is she going on? This thin layer of presumed trust. Okay? So Allah is saying, actually there is something deeper. It's a covenant of her being faithful and you also claiming to be faithful. She trusts your faith to give you the discipline and the commitment to take care of her and the children. She trusts your manlyhood. She trusts your Islam to protect her so that she doesn't need anybody else but you for her living. Okay? And this kind of covenant, of commitment, makes marriage for the woman, it's kind of like entering into a cave and then you see whether there is any kind of insects or snakes or rabbits or cats or anything. So marriage is a closed black box for a woman. And why is the woman mentioned on this side of the agreement? Because women are the weaker side of the agreement. Women, it is difficult for a divorced woman to get married. It is difficult for a woman with a child to get married. Okay? Men would prefer someone without previous marriage, without children. So when women get into this kind of agreement, because they have more love and more emotional attachment to the family and the children, they give it their all. Most of the time, we're not saying 100%, but 99% of the time or more, women are more losers if the divorce comes or if marriage breaks than men. Men, he doesn't have to walk away with pregnancy or another child or C-section 2 times. Men can walk without all of this kind of consequences. But for a woman, no, this is serious. So Allah saying, you men pay attention when you marry a woman that she is giving this marriage her all, not just part of her commitment, and she expects similar reciprocal treatment. Now, the ayat will move to give us a list of women that are prohibited for marriage. You cannot marry any woman that falls in the following list. Starting off with ayah number 22, the ayah says, and do not marry anyone that your parents had married before. So you cannot marry your mother, you cannot marry your stepmother, you cannot marry a divorcee of your father, none of the above. Anyone your father marries, you cannot marry them. Then it says, إِلَّا مَا قَدْ سَلَفَ, except if you have done this before Islam or if you have done this before the rule came in. Meaning, if you already have done this, it's okay. Go ahead. keep it. Allah would not come with a rule and say, now 100% or 20% of the community will have to divorce because they wrongly married. So, but from there forward, you don't do it. So this is the first class of women that are prohibited for marriage for certain people, which means a woman may never marry her stepson, and a woman may never marry her son. Okay. Number 23 has the rest of the list or the bulk of the list. It says, your mothers are prohibited for you. Likewise are your daughters, your sisters, your aunts on both sides, to your father and to your mother, and your nieces to your brother and your nieces to your sister, and your wet mothers, which means the mother that breastfed you as a child. So if you needed to be breastfed, the lady that breastfed you, she becomes like your mother. In English, it's called wet mother or breastfeeding mother. That is prohibited also. And your stepdaughters that you married their mother if you had wedded the marriage. Meaning, if you wed to a woman, her stepdaughter is prohibited for you. Okay? But if you have not wed the marriage to her mother, you just had a contract, but you didn't wed the marriage, but then you change your mind and you want to divorce her mother. Later on, if you want to marry the daughter, you can marry the daughter. But the opposite is not allowed. If you have contracted the daughter and you divorced her and you later want to marry her mother, you cannot do that. I want you to pay attention to these two rules. Why is a person allowed to marry the daughter of his divorcee? Definitely he cannot combine the two. You cannot marry the two at the same time. Okay? So if a person is allowed to marry the daughter of his divorcee, which is your stepdaughter, definitely after divorcing the mother, why not allowed to marry the mother after divorcing the stepdaughter? Well, basically, there is an element of consideration. The mother loves the daughter normally more than the daughter could ever love her mother. That's true for parents in general. So Allah is saying, if you married the mother, which means you had a good relationship, you desire to marry her, she desired to marry you, you signed the contract, then there is a degree of attachment between you and her. But if you divorce and you marry the daughter, the mother, her love would prevent her from being envious and jealous against her daughter. But the opposite is not true. So if you married the stepdaughter first, if you contracted the stepdaughter, you cannot divorce her and marry her mother after, because the daughter's jealousy is going to break the original family. There will be ill feeling between the daughter and the mother. Okay? The last statement is my explanation, but the text itself, it says what I told you. The text says, do not marry your stepdaughters that grew up under your care from your wives that you have wedded marriage with them. If you had not wedded the marriage with them, then there is no harm for you to marry your stepdaughter. Then it says, and your daughter-in-law, you cannot marry your daughter-in-law. If your son married a woman and then something happened and he divorced her, you cannot marry her. She becomes like your own daughter. as far as prohibition is concerned. Okay? But this is not true except for your blood paternal son. But if it is a stepson, the rule is different. Okay? But those are your own sons, the father's sons, children. You cannot marry their divorcee wives. It is also prohibited to combine two sisters at the same time. You cannot marry a person, a lady, and her sister. If you marry one sister, you cannot marry the second at the same time. But if you divorce the first, you can marry the second. That would be separate. Definitely, jealousy and envy is at play. Okay? But it becomes very difficult to live in competition with your sister. But if divorce takes place and the relationship is already sour, then the first one would not be as jealous from the second if they are separate at the time of marriage. Meaning, if I marry someone and I divorced her, marriage didn't work, relationship went bad. If I divorce her and later on I marry her sister, well, maybe her sister will not feel bad for her children, for the children of her sister to come and visit. But if she were a foreign lady, it becomes difficult. So the blood is going to work better in this case than if it is a mother-daughter relationship. So you don't combine two sisters in marriage at the same time, except for what happened in the past. If you have done this before the revelation of the ayah, the Quran says this is forgiven, but nobody should initiate it again. And then it says, Inna Allah kana ghafura rahima. Allah has been oft forgiving, oft merciful. Okay. One more prohibition, and this is a general prohibition. Those are married women. Any married woman that you have interest in, you cannot marry her, you cannot approach her for marriage until she has been divorced and her iddah, you know what iddah is? The waiting period after divorce is over. Until the waiting period is over, you cannot approach her for marriage. Okay? So the list again is: you don't marry your mother, you don't marry your stepmother, you don't marry your mother, you don't marry your sister, you don't marry I'm sorry, I'm looking at them. You don't marry your wed mother, you don't marry your sister from your wed mother. Who is your sister from your wed mother? It is when you were breastfeeding from a lady, she could only have milk if she was breastfeeding another child of her own, right? So that child is considered to be your brother from this wet relationship. If it is a sister, then she is your sister from this relationship. You cannot marry her, you cannot marry her mother, which is your wet mother. Okay. And you cannot marry your mother-in-law. You cannot marry your mother-in-law. Once you have a contract with a lady, you cannot marry her mother. Definitely, if you wed the marriage, you cannot marry her mother at any time. You cannot marry your stepdaughter, as we mentioned, from marriage that you have wed. And if you have not wed, that's okay. You cannot marry your daughter-in-law, and you cannot marry two sisters at the same time. one more, which we said is to seek for marriage or to marry any lady who is married. Okay? This rule is very important. Some people think that if a husband is away from his wife, let us say for a period of time, a long period, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, then she becomes automatically divorced and available for marriage. But that's not right. There is no such a thing as automatic divorce. There is no such a thing as automatic divorce, except in one case. What is this one case? If one of the two spouses turned kafir, left the faith. Like a sister is married, and both of them are Muslims, and both of them are doing well. But then something happened, and the wife says, and this is a case that I have lived with, I have known the brother that this happened with him. His wife came after 9/11 and all the chaos that happened. She is American, and she was very committed. She used to wear niqab, and she used to pray and teach children at the masjid. She was a teacher in the school. Okay? So she was highly committed and surrounded by Muslim sisters. They lived a nice life together. But then, when 9/11 happened, Shaitan came to her head and said, oh, this is Islam, and this Islam is not like Christianity, what you were before. So she turned back and told her husband, I'm not interested in this faith anymore. I'm not interested in you, in anything that has to do with Islam. So she apostated. She turned away from the faith. In this case, if he doesn't divorce her, she is not lawful for him to marry her or to continue to marry her. So divorce in this case becomes automatic. In any other case, there is no way it is automatic, even in the absence of one side or the other. For example, somebody went for a business trip, and after a month or so, he never contacted. It has been 2-3 years, and the wife is unable to determine where he is. He might have been in a coma in a hospital, and he's not able to identify himself. He might have been in an accident. He might have been dead. Nobody knows. Does she become automatically divorced? No, she's not. What does she need to do? She needs to go to a judge, present her case for the judge to exact a divorce in his absence, in the absence of the husband. In this divorce, the wife will have a waiting period after this divorce, and after the waiting period, she becomes clear and available for marriage. And then what happened if she got married to another person, and few months or few years, her husband came? Then this will be left for a judge to look at their case to see. Some opinion would say she can choose whether she wants to stay with this one, or she wants to go back, or she needs, if she wants to go back, there has to be a divorce from the second husband. But some scholars say the second marriage was invalid because she was married. Then the other opposite opinion would say now, if he doesn't call, if he doesn't take care of his family for a long period of time, and he doesn't contact them, and she doesn't know where he is, and she waited long enough, then she has the right to be free to get married. So it doesn't matter what his reasons may be, but she has better reason to get married rather than stay hanging, not married and not divorced. So this is a fiqhi opinion, or those are fiqhi opinions that can compete based on the best interest of all sides. But this is not our subject. I digressed a bit because I know that this issue always raises questions. Okay? Okay, ayah number 24, and do not marry married women, and do not approach them for marriage, except for what your right hand possessed. So the exemption here is for, and this was at the time when there were slaves. Uh, Slaves is another issue. We spoke about it before when the word slaves came by in previous parts of the ayat. But slavery in Islam was allowed because it was the norm of the time. But it was not allowed in the sense that Islam invited people to enslave others. Islam never did that. But it was not as prohibited, for example, as those marriages. Those marriages were called prohibited. You don't do this, you don't do this, you don't do this, except if you have done one or two cases. So prohibition was cut and dry. But why prohibiting slavery did not come in an ayah in the Quran that prohibits the act of enslaving? Well, it was prohibited in a hadith. The Prophet, peace be upon him, says that he who enslaves a free person, he would never smell the smell of paradise, which you could smell from a distance of 500 years of walking, which is very far, 500 years. So that was the only statement of prohibition of enslaving. But to set slaves free, the Quran set many rules as sometimes a punishment, as expiation, and as sin forgiveness seeking process. So if you swear and you don't make good on your swearing, there's a set a free slave, set a slave free. If you swear against your wife that I'm not going to treat you like a wife, you are like the back of my mother for me, then the expiation is to set a slave free. So Islam set a lot of rules to prohibit enslaving and to set slaves free. So by a generation or so, slaves who were alive were gone, and slaves who were left were set free, and the prohibition stood to be the rule. So anybody enslaving anyone after that, he is committing a sin. There is no such a thing now as slave market, that people stand in a market and say, you can buy me for $100,000 or you can buy me for that much. There is no such a thing. Why didn't Islam prohibit it dry? Because the economic situation and the war rules allowed slavery to be the way to hire people. So if you want to work for me, if I want to hire you, it was a different from today's slavery. In today's slavery, I hire you for the 7-8 hours I need you, but then you are on your own. Whether I paid you enough, I didn't pay you nothing. In these days, a slave and his family were complete wards of the master. He has to pay for everything they need. He has to pay for everything they need. Now, you could work, but you barely make money to pay the rent. And then you are on your own. Whether you live in the street or with a friend or anywhere, no. But if you live during the slavery days, the master would have a room for you, or an apartment for you, or a section of the house for you. So you have living. The master will provide you with full food. And Islam said, if you have a slave, you feed them from the food you eat. You don't give them the leftovers or the bad food that you don't like. Or you give them food that you eat, you and your wife and your children. So they were living a better life than a worker today who is not paid fully to take full care of his or her family. So that was slavery. Also wars, people captured enemy soldiers after the war, and whomever they capture, they distribute among their own soldiers as slaves. They become free labor. So what was the wage for the slave? The wage was that he is covered fully in every way possible. If he becomes sick, the master has to treat him or get him a physician to treat him. So he was fully supported and sponsored by the master. Okay? Now we have people who work for 8, 10 hours a day and they don't have health insurance. And they don't have enough money to pay rent or enough money to pay for food and rent and other bills. So today's slavery is actually worse than the previous slavery in terms of paying off for the basic needs for the person working for the master. Islam also instituted rights for the slaves. And one of the ways that would set a person free, if the master marries the lady, right, and she begets a child, she and her child will become free. They can go on their own. Okay? If Islam were to prohibit slavery, existing slavery at the time, all at once, saying all slaves are today free, this would have debauched and devastated the economic structure and the working formula in the community, because there would be hundreds of thousands of people who would walk in the street, they have no work to do, and they have nobody to work for, and thousands of others who have farms or factories or anything else, they will have work, but nobody to work for them. So this would have been devastated. And we find that reality in the Civil War here. The Civil War happened over slavery in the United States, and one of the arguments against setting the slaves free were the devastation of the economic market, but the others who won the battle, they established a slavery system that is worse than what the slavery was. Of course, one of the bad things about slavery was that a man owns another man, that you are beholden. You cannot work for another person. But as we see today, for the freedom that you have to work, you can work for anybody you choose, you sacrifice what you get paid for. So here it says, and beyond all of those prohibitions that we mentioned, anyone else you could marry and pay them the dower and offer them protection, and don't set up a relationship outside of the marriage. Don't set up relationship with women outside the marriage. It's prohibited, especially if it involves intimate relationships. So it says, pay them their dower, because this is mandatory as long as you want to enjoy a physical relationship with this woman, marry her and pay her the dower. And after you pay the dower, then you both could agree on whatever she wants to keep of the dower. If she wants to keep all of it, she can. If she decides, well, my husband is a bit poor, he started business, he gave me 10,000, I think I can give away 2,000. So she would forgive, it's acceptable. So there is no blame on either side if the wife gives up part thereof of her dower. Allah is oft-knowing, oft-wise. The word oft-knowing, oft-wise, Alim and Hakim refers to the vast knowledge, the vast and absolute knowledge of Allah, the vast and absolute wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These two words are repeatedly mentioned in Surah Al-Nisa, especially at the end of the ayat that talk about rulings. Whenever Allah makes a rule, it is based on His divine wisdom and divine knowledge. Why does the ayat mention this? It is to tell us, submit to Him because His knowledge is unlimited. Yours is very limited. His wisdom is unlimited. Your wisdom is based on your experience. It's very limited. And we normally submit in our everyday life to people who have knowledge more than we do, or experience and wisdom more than we do. So for example, you go to the doctor and the doctor gives you medication. Do you argue with him? No, you don't. Why? Because the doctor spent his life studying. So you defer to his knowledge. Do you know what the word defer means? Yeah. You give priority to his judgment over yours. Then ayah number 25, it says, and he amongst you who could not afford to marry chaste, free, believing women. Do you know the word chaste?
Pure.
The word pure doesn't capture, but chaste means decent, meaning ones who are not flirting with them, they are not going as girlfriends. That's what the word means. So if you cannot afford to marry a free, decent, respectful woman among the believers, then marry from those that your right hand possess, those slave ladies or women or girls, okay, who are believers. And Allah knows your faith, you men and women, some of you from another. So marry them with the permission of their family. So don't just capture her because she is your slave and force her to marry you. You can't do that. You have to seek permission from her family. Then it says, مُحْصَنَاتٍ غَيْرَ مُسَافِحَاتٍ. The relationship should be a marriage relationship, not just a pleasure relationship. Okay? Like a girlfriend. Then if they are married and their husbands give them all the rights as married women, if they then do anything of obscene behavior, if they commit zina, if they commit something similar to zina, then their punishment is half the punishment of free, chaste women. The punishment, if you marry a slave woman with the permission of her family, and you live with her as a husband and wife, if she commits adultery, her punishment is half the punishment. The punishment of a free woman, if married and commits adultery, is 100 lashes. Okay? So this would be 50. Why is the punishment less? The ayah doesn't mention. And when the Quran does not mention, any answer you provide to the question the ayah raises is going to be in the area of speculation. It is only speculation. So my speculation, based on my understanding of the Quran, is that because slave women, most of them, they used to live with an open boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. And that was one reason that their marriage was less favorable by masters and freemen. Okay? Not just because they are slaves, but because they went flirted with men and they did other things. Okay? So after she gets married, and she gets married to her husband, to her master, I'm sorry, who becomes her husband. Her husband knows that this is their lifestyle. So if she gets into an act like adultery or something, the punishment is less because that has become her lifestyle. So weaning her off is not going to happen just because she got married. It takes time to wean a person from a deviant lifestyle. And that's why the rest of the ayah comes. It says, this license, which means the license to marry your slave girl, this license is only given to ones amongst you who could not afford marrying a free woman and could not live as singles. They are afraid to commit adultery themselves. So marry those slave ladies instead of committing adultery. So that is the excuse for the license. And then it goes on to say, but if you hold on to your patience, this is better for you, and Allah is oft forgiving, oft merciful. I think I will stop here and we'll continue next week to catch up with my next appointment. And we can take 2 questions.
And what ayah did we stop at?
We finished ayah 25 and we'll start with ayah 26.
Oh, she does have a question. When you're talking about, she wants to go back to the issue